fighting sports are both brutal and competitive, with only the best of the best coming out on top. But every once in a while, a fighter tries to get an unfair advantage and is ultimately caught. So here are the fighters that got caught cheating, and the first name on our list tried the most basic excuse possible to get out of trouble. Just before his iconic win over Oscar De La Hoya in 2007, boxer Shane Mosley was caught using performance-enhancing drugs. So when he was asked about whether he'd used them, he reluctantly admitted it. But he also said he didn't know they were drugs, even though fans quickly pointed out that there's video evidence of him saying the opposite. Mosley still tried to victimize himself. His trainer, Daryl Hudson, had told him to take supplements, specifically from Victor Conti, who's the founder and executive director of Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative. Hudson persuaded Mosley to use these dietary supplements, which turned out to be steroids sold under the names Cream and Clear. You'd think the names would raise suspicion, but he couldn't use his excuse for much longer, since Conti and multiple other people came out saying he knew. Mosley tried suing them, but that was quickly shut down, and he was exposed for being a cheat. But he wasn't the only one to use his trainer to get an unfair advantage. Just before Mosley went against Antonio Margarito, his trainer noticed that a plaster-like substance was applied to Antonio's hands, which was then rewrapped. The plaster of Paris hardens when it comes into contact with moisture, and since fighters sweat so much during the match, it makes their punches much stronger. Richardson immediately became suspicious that he was using loaded gloves after spotting the drug, and even though Margarito lost that fight, a hearing was called to look into what exactly happened before the fight. Both Margarito and Javier Capetillo, the trainer who wrapped the fighters' hands, were found guilty. They ended up having their boxing licenses suspended for a year, and ironically enough, they used the same excuse of not knowing what the substance was. But in 2022, he faced the same accusations from other competitors, so clearly he hadn't learned from his mistakes. Still, at least he could salvage his career after the scandal. Alexander Silva can only hope to do the same with him.
Yeah, Michael, this is an example of your rival becoming your opponent, or your idol becoming your rival here.
This is not where...
Because while he is regarded as one of the best fighters to enter the octagon, his cheating scandal had ruined his reputation forever, and UFC fans don't forgive that easily. Before he lost several matches in a row, Silva had long held the title of undisputed UFC champion, and even though his reputation was mostly unharmed, he could not win back the crown. But after Silva's unanimous decision victory over Nick Diaz in 2015, it was discovered that Silva had failed his drug tests. He ended up testing positive for anabolic steroids in a pre-fight random out-of-competition test, and then again in a test for another substance. Of course, Silva straight up denied using any sort of performance-enhancing drugs, but I honestly wish he'd used a better excuse than saying that samples were contaminated with Viagra. Naturally, the Nevada State Athletic Commission didn't believe him. He decided to argue the issue before the NSAC, but his story was destroyed when the NSAC discovered his timeline was incorrect. Silva ended up admitting to the committee that he had purchased Viagra in Thailand, which must have contained an illicit ingredient that he was unaware of. The story didn't hold up, and Silva was idiotic for even trying to hide his cheating. He got a year's suspension and a $380,000 fine. Plus, his victory over Diaz was changed to a no contest. Brock Lesnar was a former professional wrestler who now competes in mixed martial arts. Now, there's no doubt that he made his imprint on UFC. Lesnar would compete in the octagon against Mark Hunt at UFC 200 after taking an almost 5-year break from the sport, and he won by unanimous decision after dominating most of the contest. But it was soon revealed that Lesnar had tested positive for clomiphene, which is an anti-estrogen that can enhance testosterone levels and counteract the effects of steroid use. Not only that, he'd failed 2 pre-fight drug tests. Lesnar got penalized for violating the UFC's anti-doping code. He got a year-long suspension and a $250,000 fine. And according to rumors, he hasn't even bothered to pay it yet. But Lesnar wasn't the only fan-favorite fighter who made a mistake. Jake LaMotta was a boxing icon who became a legend in the sport. Robert De Niro even played him in Martin Scorsese's film Raging Bull. But something the average may not know is is LaMotta once threw away a match. He made a deal with the Mafia before facing Billy Fox in 1947. This gave him a shot at the title in exchange for losing the match on purpose. LaMotta followed instructions and dove in the 4th round, but he forgot to make the move look believable. So obviously, the New York State Athletic Commission got suspicious and looked into the incident. Their investigation ended up with LaMotta getting punished after eventually admitting what he did. But just 10 fights later, he finally won his title shot. It's insane that a fighter as talented as LaMotta had to resort to match fixing. He had a spotless reputation in the sport, but the same thing can't be said about the next fighter on our list. Now, Mike Kelly isn't doing himself any favors by maintaining his reputation as one of the dirtiest fighters of all time. He has essentially done everything a professional fighter shouldn't do, but amongst all the stuff he's pulled, there's one incident that stands out the most. Kyle was facing off against Brian Olsen at WEC 20 on May 5th, 2006, and as things started to heat up, Kyle landed a kick that knocked Olsen straight out, and he would have been able to get away with the move by acting as if he was caught up in the excitement of the moment, if he'd only ended things there and not let it go further. But Max resumed his ground and pound as Olsen collapsed to the floor and kept hitting Olsen as the referee tried to remove him. And it's neither the first nor the last occasion that something similar has occurred. As a spectator, it was a disgusting incident to watch, and it would have been much worse if the official didn't step in. Although it wasn't Kyle's first or last time pulling something like this, it was the most appalling one. But it still isn't as bad as the stunt Luis Resto pulled in 1983. Boxers Billy Ray Collins and Luis Resto were set to fight at Madison Square Garden, and everyone knew it was going to be a close match. They exchanged blows for 10 rounds, but Collins was nearly unrecognizable after taking a lot of damage. But as Resto walked to Collins' corner to shake their hands after the game, Collins' father, who was one of the cornermen, saw something strange about Resto's gloves. He saw that his gloves basically had no cushioning, and a referee even confirmed it later on. Immediately, the officials began an investigation because of how badly Collins was injured, and the result was that the New York State Athletic Commission suspended both Resto and his trainer, Carlos Lewis. Both men even received prison sentences, and Resto swore off boxing forever. But that still didn't benefit Billy Ray Collins, since his eye was far too damaged to ever be the same again. This incident was just another example of how harmful cheating can be in professional sports. Well, there you have it. These were the fighters that got caught cheating.